Lovely. Hi, James. Thank you so much for talking today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, I really wanted to talk today about your wonderful book, The Healing Pond, and what you learned through this incredible journey that you had. Can you speak on it?
Yeah, so it all started quite a long time ago when I became middle-aged. And that happened early. I played a lot of sport, and then I didn't look after myself. And my brain imagined that my body could carry on doing stuff. But I found out, to my horror, that things weren't going very well. I ended up having 3 knee operations, um, and I was massively overweight. And uh, hitting that kind of crutch where you've been looking after children, you haven't really been looking after yourself, but you still think you can run around. And I got to the point where I couldn't run around. And then I decided to build a pond, and which is an altogether ridiculous thing to do. And as I did that, I snapped my Achilles.
Oh, yeah.
And the problem with that was that it compacted all the other bad things about me, about my physical state at that time. I was lined up to go for an operation, and they actually pulled me out, saying I was too unfit. So I ended up in a boot with wedges taken out. The problem is I was on so much medication by this point. I mean, I'd been on paracetamols for the best part of a decade for my knees.
Yes.
And then I went on to some very strong opiate-based stuff, which disagreed with me enormously. And I found that my health was spiraling completely out of control. And I was ending up with a packet of pills every day, like a little tableau. And I ended up back in hospital with problems with my gut. I ended up back in hospital with a fungal foot, which was basically stuck in the boot, and it became such a big thing that I looked at my parents, or my mother and my grandmother, and I'd seen them go down the spiral of taking endless pharmaceutical products. I've got nothing against doctors, but I single-handedly realised, I suddenly realised that these things were not doing me any favours. And I had to get out of it. And the problem was how. I couldn't move. I was really struggling. And I think also that brings on a kind of mental struggle as well, because you've got to kind of get out of it. We've been in a system whereby we've relied so much on other people looking after us. It suddenly dawned on me that I really had to take the reins and look after myself. Yeah. So I then, as I was doing this, the pond carried on being built, and everything went wrong with the pond. So we had the walls collapsing. Yeah. We had the guy who put the liner in; he nearly cut off his thumb.
Oh.
That we suddenly found that as the pond was about to fill up, there was a land drain going straight into it. And it backwashed so much that we ended up having to put the entire patio into the bottom of the pond, which nearly caused a divorce. But anyway, another story. So things were going badly that way. Things were going very badly with me. And it got to the point whereby I was desperate to find another way to get myself right. And the pond was about halfway full, and I started to hear about a guy called Wim Hof, and he did a kind of basic breathing technique and cold water and cold. And I did my first breathing kind of following his guidelines on the side. And it was an incredibly emotional, kind of moving, almost spiritual moment whereby something inside really caught, and I felt a whole lot of stuff flush out of me. And it was just a simple practice of doing something different, and it felt really great. It felt really great. It felt like I'd been swamped with love and all sorts of stuff. And I just didn't know what had happened. But I thought, I did this a few times and really liked it, and I felt myself going into a deep kind of meditation. I had no idea what meditation was all about. It was just a sort of woo word. Meditation. But I started to go into this lovely sense of understanding and going deep into myself. And then I would read stuff and follow some few people, and there was people saying, travel into your body, go into your knees, go into your ankle, start mending it from the inside. And it was kind of like, wow, okay, let's see if I can do that. And I did, and it made just a bit of difference. And I thought, wow, this is an extraordinary thing, and before long I was doing more of it every day, and then the pond had filled up to about halfway. So, I mean, there was nothing there, just a bit of water in the bottom. And this is in winter. And I thought to myself, well, let's do the cold. Let's do a length. And it was just one of those lovely evenings, the sun setting, birds are tweeting away, and it was kind of like, right, I think it's time. It's time to do this. Stripped off, did a couple of lengths, and I came out feeling euphoric, absolutely euphoric. And I kind of realized that I'd found something just for me, just perfect. And so this was the beginning of a whole journey of basically then slowly going and kicking out the morphine, kicking out the paracetamol. And I had a couple of other problems at that point. I was overweight, so I then went, right, how on earth am I going to get myself down? And it was a question of, well, I'm on this really, this journey. It feels like I've started something, and I looked into fasting and I read a few books on it, a couple of really crazy ones and a couple of really good ones, and it kind of struck me that fasting wasn't necessarily, it was a good way to lose weight if you want to do it, but it's actually more about understanding you as a person. Yeah. And I went off and I thought, well, I'll try a couple of days first off, and I found that actually I found it really quite straightforward. And then a week or two later, I did a whole week, and I came out at the end of that feeling fantastic. Absolutely bouncing alive. It's so something else had taken over. So I'd kind of stopped. One idea was, don't do the cold with the fasting. It's probably not a good idea for you. Mm-hmm. So I didn't do that. But the fasting had I just really enjoyed it. I just suddenly felt, yes, this is good. This is really good. This is what I need. And I lost the weight. And I had one more thing that I had to do, is because basically if you've got bad Achilles, and I'd had bad hamstrings, very tight hamstrings, and the Achilles is snapped, and I'd had back problems, and I'd cracked some vertebrae in my neck. And so that whole movement of my spine and my legs, I just ignored it because I didn't understand it, I think. And then a friend came along and said, you should try these stretches called the 5 Tibetan rites, or the Fountain of Youth. And it was by a pool with a family, and there are 5 simple things you can do. You do, and you repeat them. And the first is you spin, and it's all about getting your energetic centers all straightened. And of course, all the kids thought this was wonderful and did all the spinning and threw themselves in the pool, so all giddy. And at first, it was kind of, I could do 3 or 4 of each, and it was wow. These are really great, because I'm suddenly feeling like my body and my legs are starting to stretch out, and my back is feeling stronger, and so I combined that, and so I had this core of breath work, meditation, cold, stretching, and fasting, and suddenly I think it was over 4, 5, 6 months, I kicked out all the drugs. And I pretty well kicked out most of the pain. and I was back to normal. And at the same time, amazingly, this ridiculous homemade pond started working. So it was, clambering around other people's ponds, picking out plants and throwing them in and doing all sorts of funny things with air pumps and air pipes and having the wildlife starting to come in. I suddenly realized that what I'd had is almost a journey in which was in sympathy with the building of a pond, and it is now a very beautiful and wholesome natural water pool which bubbles away. And I mean, even though the whole thing nearly cost me my marriage, it turns out that Charlotte, my wife, actually loves it, probably more than anyone else, from having been very anti it. So we have, and it's now a kind of, it's kind of made the property, it's made us in a funny sort of way. So hence I wrote the book called The Healing Pond.
It's a fantastic book, and I want everyone to read it because you talk in such beautiful detail about all the different elements of your healing journey and what you learned from them. I suppose if I could ask, what do you feel it was about the combination of those techniques that worked? Why did it work, what you did?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I tried lots of things. I did EFT tapping. I liked tapping, but it didn't quite. It didn't. I don't know. It was really good. I mean, there's something nice about it. I tried supplements, and I just felt they were all a bit of a waste of time. But it was the combination. It's like understanding that if you go into a meditational state, well, I think the whole thing is it's about what resonates with you.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about this, and I was desperate to learn, as I said, absolutely desperate. And so it's kind of finding things that kind of go, yes, my body has said, yes, that's really good. And there's nothing like coming out of a cold swim. There is nothing like it. So when it's really cold at Christmas or, when it's icy, you can't really swim. You just go in there and submerge and come out. And you have to go. You lose. It's like the monkey part of your brain stops. So for that chatter just disappears. So the first time when I first did it, it was this complete silence, and it's a remarkable thing because you're really touching base with a different side of you. Now that sounds a bit kind of out there, but this is real. It's a real thing. It's like your other self that is there saying, yes, this is really great, this feels wonderful. And so that was each time I did it, it was like the fasting it just felt great. And it's really hard because you have to take this on yourself. And you have to, the only way I could do it was to learn, and I'm sure that I probably did things. I'm sure my breathwork is pretty average and dreadful, but to be honest, it worked. I'm not sure my meditation is probably, but it works. I got into a state whereby I found myself, and in a deep way.
Sorry, I love what you're saying. I guess I want to ask, what is it about getting in touch with yourself, getting into that deeper part that affects the pain? How are those two parts connected?
I think you can control it. I think there's an element within us all which we just have completely lost touch with, about how there's almost like a side of us which we know is there. It's always around us, but we don't tap into it enough. I don't know. I don't quite know how to explain it. There's probably a very good metaphor for it, which I can't think of. But it's almost like it's like something else is egging you on inside, and it is this part of you that says no. I mean, I think there's a part of us, that part of your body, part of our being, our human being, which is forever trying to protect us. And it says, no, don't do this, don't do that, whatever you do, don't go into the cold. So the cold is really interesting because it takes away fear. And I think this is a really big part of this whole thing, because we are fearful of trying something ourselves. And every day you go into cold, every single day still happens. I still don't want to go in. I have this thing screaming at me in my head, going, don't do it. You're going to hurt yourself. And every time I go, no, override, deep breath, go in, a little bit of a splash, and then you're in, and it's kind of this shock hits you, and you cannot think of anything. I mean, it's like the numbness that goes off, and then you come out, and it's this bang, all the endorphins hit you. It's kind of like, yes, I did it, bugger off you.
Do you think that this learning how to override was part of why it works, why the sensations change?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's hard to know. It's all so made up, and there are lots of people who are real specialists in this. But yeah, but that's almost about taking back control. So that is override. It's overriding what we are presumed to have been told. I think that's probably the right way. So I've been forever, going to the doctor. Oh, I've got a bad knee, and go and take something for it. And it wasn't kind of looking at the cause of it. It's like, why are they so bad? Is it something I've, what have I done? Have I overdone exercise? Am I eating badly? Am I, there are loads of things, but you have to take responsibility for it. And I think taking responsibility for your health was one thing I hadn't even considered. And I think it's not only just your physical body, it's your mental side as well. So going into a kind of meditative state and kind of thinking through, going into your knees or into the Achilles and just kind of blitzing it with a fire hydrant, mental fire hydrant, just took away an incredible amount of pain suddenly. And it's like, wow, that's really effective. I don't know how it's effective, but it's really effective.
And what are you able to do now that you couldn't do before you started your journey?
Okay, so it sort of carried on because I decided that I would try and sort my knees out. My knees got to such a bad state that I was, really, really walking almost with a stick. Because I have osteoarthritis in the knees. I went to see a specialist about getting knee replacements, and he advised me that I wasn't in enough pain, so I'd have to wait. And so I kind of thought, well, maybe that's an opportunity. And I found a guy who basically had osteoarthritis in his hips, and he was a runner. And he couldn't get over onto his bicycle because it was so painful. And they said, you've got to go and get a hip operation. And he changed his tactic enormously. He said, no, I think I've got to find out what causes osteoarthritis. And he did a deep dive, and it turns out it's carbohydrates and sugar. They just keep inflaming the joints. And if you take those out, you've got a pretty good chance. I mean, if you think about it, if you break a bone, after a while, the bone will heal if you give it the right conditions to heal. And I kind of was on this movement of trying to work out how to do that. But also, I had also got to the point whereby I'd forgotten how to move as well, because my knees and ankle have all been such a headache for me that I was limping. And so I realized, it was only when someone said, if you want to sort your knees out, sort your feet out. If you want to, if you sort your knees out, sort your hips and your glutes out. And I realized I did a few exercises. I realized I couldn't do a simple foot exercise. And I realized my glutes and my hips were absolutely, I felt like a hip injury coming. When you get that slight kind of, ooh. Yeah. And it's because I hadn't moved them. And so it's starting to do squats, starting to do lunges, all the things that you kind of think, I would have thought 5 years ago I wouldn't even have dreamt of doing. So changed my diet completely, started moving, and this has culminated in the fact that I have lost all the pain in my knees now for the first time in a decade. And I'm now, I know, it's amazing. Okay, I know it's still there, but there's no pain. And I started kind of being active, doing gardening, so I do a couple of days gardening. And it's the first time I've been able to do that for a good decade. So it's really, I think there are solutions that we are not told about, but you just almost have to go and find them out for yourself.
I love that your solutions are a combination between physical and psychological changes, and you found that balance that really works for you. If that balance was put to the test, say the knee pain came back in a big way, what would be your strategy to getting it back to where it is now again?
Well, I know how it works. Oddly, I think I know how I can deal with it. I mean, there are. If I get clobbered with a tree or something like that, and a really big bruise, well, that's just time. But I know that if I'm outside, I know the light is really good, and I know the cold is really good, and I know that the meditation is really good. I know that the bending into my knee is really good, and I know that if I watch my diet, it makes a huge difference. I know this because actually over the last few months, so I did this over a period of 6 months, but the last 2 months I've kind of slightly fallen off the wagon, as it were. And I can kind of feel when, for example, we have a party and maybe have a few too many beverages, I can feel it. And it's really interesting. So I know that I can probably deal with that. And I think mentally I'm much, much stronger. I hope it doesn't go there. I actually only see it going one way, which is fully recovering.
Completely.
I hope so. I'm not sure I'll ever be running a marathon or doing anything like that. I really don't want to, but do you know what I mean?
I completely know what you mean, and I like the confidence that you have in what you do, and that there's such obvious things that once you put them in place, yes, you see the difference from it, and it's a combination of like I said, those physical and psychological changes. They all massively make a difference. I suppose I have a question for you, and if you don't have an answer, it's totally fine. We understand from evidence about osteoarthritis that some people have pain with it and some people don't have pain with it. Why do you think your pain started in the first place, whereas someone may have the same level of degeneration and no pain?
Good question. I think it's really interesting. I think it manifests some sort of problem. So a lot of people have osteoarthritis in their fingers or various joints, and I wonder whether there's a correlation between something they've been doing too much of, or they haven't been looking at. Whether the pain thing, I probably had it for a lot longer than I thought, but I think it just deteriorated to such a point that I wasn't doing the various things that probably helped me out. I stopped doing those, or I wasn't paying attention to my diet enough. And it's just a huge learning curve. And I don't know, it's really, really hard. It's really hard because it's what works with you, and it's not going to work with everybody.
Yeah.
Everyone is different. So I just found, I think almost by chance, but I was the right time of my life to have gone through this trauma to make a complete change and find out and try and get rid of the pain. Mentally, physically, whatever I could do.
Yes,
and I think the thing is that for anyone else, they have to go on their own little journey too. But they have to want to do it.
Completely agree. As a final word, is there anything that you want to share with people watching that may be on their own journey, or something that you feel is the most important thing they should know?
I think you have to trust yourself. There's a whole part of you that you is totally untouched and is there to help you. It really is. It's awfully woo, but it's true. I like that. But it's there, and you've got to trust yourself, and you've got to be you've got to want it. And it's that everything's possible. The human body is a remarkable thing, and I think we have been shut out of the capabilities of what the human body can actually do. And I think a lot of people, and you'll find this just through the Wim Hofs of this world and all these other people who are giving remarkable insights into how the human body works, that all these things are possible. But you have to go and find it on your own little terms. It's no one else's terms. You can't. Don't expect it to be given to you. I think if you understand that, there is no savior but yourself. That's quite deep.
Love it.
But do you know what I mean? That is I think that's the parting piece of wisdom, if you want to call it that.
I think it's an excellent parting bit of wisdom. I feel very inspired. James, thank you so much for speaking today, and I hope everyone gets a chance to read The Healing Pond and maybe not go on the same journey, but find their own journeys towards recovery.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.